increasing use of surveillance, there's actually quite a lot of class struggle, to use an old-fashioned term. By one estimate, supposedly from the Chinese government, leaked to independent labor activists, 1,000 people a day in Shenzhen, the main industrial city in the south, are involved in some sort of labor action. So what I looked at in this article was peasant and worker resistance, and there's actually, evidence that despite the odds against them, they're having some success. And one major measure of this is the fact that the new government that came in 2002, 2003, Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao, have responded to the growing discontent, not necessarily out of some sort of enlightened set of theories, but pragmatically, they've actually passed a number of laws which may or may not pan out to be good, but on paper give greater rights to peasants. They've removed one of the main taxes on them, given them more legal rights to oppose displacement, passed a very good labor law that gives workers basically tenure status. They used to be basically serving at the pleasure of their employers, could be fired without cause. Now they have to have cause, and after a certain period of time, they have long-term contracts. Business pundits condemn the law as introducing European-style inflexibility. And this is giving workers some leverage and is actually raising wages. And interestingly, there's a long tradition dating from Tiananmen days of trying to create an independent trade union movement in China. That has been crushed. That's a non-starter. But the current government has encouraged workers, well, they said that they want to see all 80% of private firms unionized, but through the All China Federation of Trade Unions. So I thought this was kind of ridiculous as a state union. But when you actually go to Shenzhen and connect with the underground labor movement, many of whom are suffering from severe repression, usually from local authorities in league with Hong Kong, Taiwanese, and local capitalists producing stuff on contract for Walmart, Kmart, everybody else. Surprisingly, these underground labor activists and their allies in Hong Kong, some of whom are veterans of Tiananmen, have actually, their position is that now what has to happen is that they have to renovate the official union and not take it over, but actually work within it to turn it into a real union that will defend workers' rights. So there's something interesting going on in response to this rising discontent over the last couple of years, whereby the central government is growing concerned about the really, wild brutality and corruption of many local governments, the way that's antagonizing workers, the way workers are pushing, and they realize there has to be something given to the working class of China. Wages have to rise, and there has to be some modicum of rights for that class, which is, as you say, is absolutely essential to the engine of global capitalism.
But yet the vast majority of people in China are still in the countryside, right? So what is happening in terms of the peasantry of China? Yeah,
in the countryside, one of the main problems people face is, along with environmental degradation, is this continued land grabs. One of the village I profiled in the article was fighting to keep its land because a big state-owned coal company wanted to strip mine it. And so this is one cause of displacement. The other thing is that the countryside is still very, very poor. There has been, in the last 2 decades, the rise of what are called the township and village enterprises, which are these usually kind of hybrid local state plus foreign capital owned firms which are providing some industrial work. But due to displacement by industry and poverty, people are leaving the countryside. And they're organizing there. Last year in Anhui, a group of villages refused to pay taxes, and that actually led to the government saying, okay, we're going to abolish this tax law because the peasants are clearly under serious pressure, and we can use repression to force them to continue to live in poverty and pay their taxes and ask for serious trouble, or we can just remove this tax and force employers to actually pay a little bit more. And 10% growth for 10 years in a row means there is enough money to go around for the working class to, for there to be greater redistribution through higher wages.
Do you feel the Olympics has had an effect on what is going on now in China, this increased international scrutiny, or is there?
In terms of international scrutiny, it seems mostly to be around the issue of Tibet and broad human rights stuff, and the issue of labor has not come up that much. In China, I was struck by the way that the earthquake and the Olympics really reinstilled or reignited an intense nationalism and almost a defensiveness around people who, in many cases, were actually involved in struggles against local authorities, and were very apologetic about it. And as in the article, I discussed these guys who organized basically an independent trade union and had this wildcat strikes, but they're like, well, no, they weren't protests. They were just big meetings at the factory. We just wanted to communicate with the bosses, and they were like, you know, almost apologetic about opposing the country and causing troubles for the country. So that's one main effect that the Olympics is having internally, is to sort of, you know, change the subject and instill this kind of national state of mind.
Well, Naomi Klein, following your line on surveillance in China, let's go back to the United States. We're moving into the conventions, and by the way, Democracy Now! Will be there for the Democratic Convention in Denver. We're expanding to 2 hours, and in St. Paul, where also we'll be broadcasting 2 hours every day. But we're just getting word out of Denver, for example, CBS 4 exposed that there are warehouses prepared with pens and barbed wire for jailed protesters, with warnings on the wall, stun guns, beware of stun gun use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think the timing of this is really interesting, that, you know, the global sort of media spotlight is going to move from Beijing to Denver to Minneapolis, and we're really going to have an opportunity to actually see how globalized this surveillance state is. And, you know, I really think we're seeing a kind of a global middle ground emerge, where China is becoming more like the United States in very visible ways, and the United States is becoming more like China in less visible ways. So many of the things that people are really ready to condemn about the surveillance and police state tactics being used in Beijing right now, the surveillance cameras everywhere, the banning of protests, or the pushing of protesters into these protest pens that are empty because people are too afraid to use them, preemptive arrests. You know, we are going to see this in Denver, unmanned drones and so on. So I think we are very vividly going to see this meeting in the middle, if you will, of these tactics.
And in China, the corporations that are involved with supplying China with this surveillance equipment that will be there long after the Olympics?
Exactly. This, you know, one of the things that I think people forget is that it's actually illegal to sell police equipment to China. This was a law passed after Tiananmen Square precisely to prevent American technology from being used for repressive purposes. And the Olympics have really been just this incredible opportunity for American high-tech surveillance firms, because they've been able somehow to sell police equipment to China, very high-tech police equipment to China, not in the name of domestic policing, but in the name of securing an international sporting event, which, of course, is attended by the President of the United States, and nobody wants anything bad to happen to him. So, you know, in many ways, the Olympics have provided this backdoor way for all of this American technology and equipment, policing equipment, to flow into China. And, of course, as people like Sharon Hom, head of human rights in China, have been saying now for months, all of this equipment is staying in China after the Games, and it will be directed at many of the workers.
And the corporations involved? We have 10 seconds. The U.S. corporations involved?
Honeywell, IBM, General Electric, Google, Yahoo. I mean, we've heard about this, but in terms of building the surveillance state, one company to really watch is L1. They're doing the fingerprinting and iris scanning in the United States, and they've been selling this software to Chinese companies that are embedding it in their Golden Shield network.
Naomi Klein, Christian Parenti, I want to thank you both very much for joining us. Their pieces appear in The Nation and the Huffington Post and Rolling Stone. That does it for our broadcast. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Shufo Abdul-Kadir, Saran Mata, Angela Comet, Steve Martinez, Nicole Salazar, Hani Masood, Rabbi Karen, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera are our engineers. Special thanks also to Becca Staley. Our website's democracynow.org for our video and audio podcast and transcript. I'm Amy Goodman for Juan Gonzalez.